What is up, group members? I'm licensed psychologist Dr. J.
I'm licensed psychologist Dr. Jessica Rabon.
And I'm licensed clinical social worker Kristen Gingrich.
K10 is out this week, sleeping all the way through Sleep Awareness Week. Snoring away. But this week, we'll be talking about the many forms of self-harm, an area that has a lot of stigma, misconception, but we'll sort through all that with you. So settle in, take a seat, and welcome to group therapy. Last week, we hope the whole episode wasn't a snooze fest, but we asked, what is one thing you can do this week to help with your sleep? Don't listen to anything KBI says. Okay, but someone did say, go to sleep with the lights off.
Good.
Did anybody talk about their Remy's?
There's been no mention of Remy's, nor will there ever be a mention of Remy's ever again. Another person said, stop scrolling TikTok before bed.
That's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Also good.
Yeah, KBI, you should do that before, during,
Before we call me out, how about the both of you? You cannot scroll TikTok before bed.
I mean, I'm usually watching my Law & Order SVU, which is not any better.
Exactly. So before you call me out, look in the mirror.
It's true. It's a good reflection technique. And someone else said, take Benadryl, which, as K10 would have put out, has pros and cons, right? Mm-hmm. Taking substances you become reliant on, maybe in the short term, okay, but in the long run, not so much. But we always love your responses. This week, this is a topic that was requested a lot. And I think it's one that it has a lot of misconception. A lot of people are curious about it. But the many forms of self-harm. So I'm wondering off the jump, what do you think some of the big misconceptions about self-harm? What are they?
That it's for attention.
That self-harm is only things like cutting and burning or scratching.
People
only do it when they're suicidal.
Yeah, that was the one I was thinking too. Is like people are trying to end their lives or they are suicidal.
That it's a teenager thing.
Just a teenager thing. Yeah. Some people think that. Yeah, I think those feel like some of
those
the
are like the
ones.
biggest ones.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is it? What are we talking about? What is this self-harm thing?
I think it's also super hard to talk about. Like, it's so hard. Like, I was even trying to think about, like, how do we want to approach this conversation? How do we do it in a way that is tasteful, aware of the sensitivity of the topic, while also not engaging in the stigma of it? Right.
Which I think by not talking about it, right? Like if we act like a lot of the apps act, like censoring this content, any creator who makes a lot of mental health content will tell you, if you make content about self-harm, suicidality at all, you can believe mother algorithm is slowing that one down. Like it's not going to get seen as much as all your other videos, which to me amplifies stigma. So off the jump, I'm glad so many people requested this topic. I'm glad we're addressing it. And I agree. It's an area that people who do self-harm can have a lot of shame around it. And it makes you wonder, is it because of how we are in society, how we treat people who self-harm?
Yeah, I mean, we look at it. We look at it and we say, oh, this person's just looking for attention. I mean, one of those big stigmas is, oh, this person is only doing it to get attention. They're faking it, whatever it may be. When one of the things that I always talk about is, yeah, they are doing it for attention, and not in the way that you think. Not in this negative aspect. They're doing it because they're trying to express something that they just don't quite know how to express most of the time. But we have this idea that seeking attention is negative.
Mm.
And it's and that it's and it's like gross or nasty to seek this, when the reality is a lot of the people who are seeking attention, they want people to see them. They want people to see their struggle. But again, on the other hand, a lot of people are very shameful of it. They want to hide it. They're not okay with the fact that this is something that they do. But it's the only way that they know how to cope, or the only way that they found that has been helpful to them in coping.
You hit the nail on the head there, KBI, because when I think of self-harm, and I know we'll talk about various forms, like it's a coping skill. At the end of the day, it is a coping skill. And yes, I have worked with individuals that maybe over time it becomes more of like a habit or a compulsion just because they've engaged in it so long and they feel like they can't stop. But regardless of the form of self-harm, whether that is what we traditionally think of like cutting, burning, scratching, whether it's head banging, punching walls, even like substance use, you can conceptualize like restrictive eating disorders as self-harm in many ways, because it's something at the end of the day that harms yourself, in emotionally, physically, all of the above, but it is a form of coping. And people may not look at it as adaptive coping, but to your point, KBI, for many people, it's what they have found works for them when either other coping skills haven't worked or they haven't found more healthy or adaptive. And these words can be stigmatizing in many ways. So if you all have a better word for it, coping skills or things that we would consider maybe more positive that don't cause harm to oneself.
Definitely. And I think especially when you think about like the biology of some, and I know we're going to talk about the wide array of the different forms self-harm can come in, but I think we know in a lot of classic forms of self-harm that there is that endorphin release. And so you're getting this biological component where these hormones are easing pain that we feel. So there can be that little mood boost. And if you're suffering from depression or trauma or any number of things where you're feeling physical pain, that this is your body's way of kind of adapting, and why it can become a sort of repetitive behavior because you are getting this little boost out of it. Again, we'll talk about that there's many other ways to cope, but there is sort of this reason that gets connected with a lot of these maybe more classic forms of self-harm.
And I think you said something really well there, Dr. J, about like the pain, because at least in my experience, a lot of people that engage in more of the classic forms of self-harm, so I'm thinking like cutting, burning, scratching, head banging, talk about needing to feel physical pain because their emotional pain is so overwhelming. It's very hard. I mean, it's hard to sit in physical pain as well. But when you're experiencing emotional pain and it's so overwhelming and you don't feel like you have an outlet or release, and those other coping skills like journaling, listening to music, deep breaths aren't working, to your point, you engage in some type of physical pain, it releases those endorphins, you feel better.
But I think another piece is the ability to have control. For a lot of individuals, this is something that they have distinct control over. And I think a lot of times if your emotions are so over the place, or maybe situations that you are in are unmanageable, those type of things, this gives you something that you can control. And that's something that I've heard from a lot of people while being in the field, that it's just saying like, this is the one thing that is mine that I can make the choice over. Again, regardless of if it's helpful or unhelpful in the grand scheme of things, like in that moment, it is helpful to them.
Totally. And so we're naming feeling a lot of pain, wanting a sense of control. And I also think of people who are completely numb. Like I think of some of the traumas I've been through in my life that led to bouts of depression. when you're stuck in that numbness, it is like you feel like I would rather feel anything than this perpetual just nothingness. And I've only had flavors of that, like dipping into it after different traumas, like my brother and dad dying. But it is like, it garners a lot of like sympathy of like the different forms people can feel that in. Like if you have chronic depression, if again, this is just something you experience on a more regular basis, that numbness is just so disconcerting. Like it feels like, again, I would rather feel anything. But if you've never felt that level of numbness, if you've never felt that out of control or just felt such emotional pain or pain in general, you might not get it. But I think that's where we have to get more compassionate in general. And I think this is where a lot of the stigma for self-harm comes to. It's like people can't really conceptualize the why.
Yeah.
But if you conceptualize the numbness, if you conceptualize the emotional pain, if you conceptualize the control pieces, you can start to be like, okay, I get this. I can start to understand this.
And I think too, like, and feel free to disagree with me, I feel like there is a harder time understanding maybe some of the self-harm that we stereotypically think of, like cutting, burning, things like that, than someone running till their body feels like it's going to fall apart. Because they're trying to feel they're trying to express maybe an emotion, but again, I'm just going to go run until I feel like I'm going to collapse. That is also a form of self-harm. But for some reason we can I feel like a lot of times we can conceptualize that easier than we could conceptualize someone cutting or burning themselves. And that comes with and that, I think that's the epitome of the stigma of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just going to say, and those lines, when it's in the form of like exercise, they get a little bit blurry, where it's like someone, cutting, burning themselves. You kind of don't have those, is this quote unquote adaptive or not? But I'm with you. I agree. Like somebody who's exercising to those points, it certainly would be self-harm.
Or like boxing. Going boxing and boxing until your knuckles are bleeding.
Sure.
And so it's like one of those things. It's just interesting how our society views the differences in those. In reality, they are they are the same thing.
It's just in a different form.
It's just a more socially acceptable.
Well, and going off of that, KBI, another thing I think of is like emotional self-harm and like just beating yourself down, talking to yourself critically. And in some ways, I think our society can understand that more too, because we all in some ways do that. But obviously to the extent, like if you are basically being a bully to yourself, making yourself feel horrible, I would argue, and once again, you all can disagree with me, that is a form of self-harm because you are harming your emotionality, you're harming your mental health. Or even just like drinking in many ways, I would say is a more socially acceptable form of self-harm. Justin, when you were talking about numbness and wanting to feel something, on the other extreme, I feel like when people are feeling way too many emotions, they find things to numb themselves. But if you're out drinking at a party, it's socially acceptable. People might not realize your intent to drink is to numb away the pain and not remember what you're doing. But they can be like, oh, that's just Billy Bob, drinking too many beers again and not understanding what's going on underneath. I don't know why I picked the name Billy Bob.
He's just entering the family. It's just entering the family.
With Uncle Nicky. And
he's just new family member alert.
But I definitely related to that example you gave, Jessica, because my dad passed away winter break between my freshman, or that was my sophomore year. So winter break of my sophomore year, going from first semester to second semester. And when I came back, it was like, I just went right back to undergrad life, except I was drinking a lot more. I was way more irritable. I was so angry. Like anyone who knew me that year, like especially that calendar year, which was like my sophomore into my junior year, I was just anything would piss me off. But again, under the guise of all this, I was just dealing with grief, the trauma of my dad dying from cancer. And it was just totally socially acceptable that I would just rage at parties and drink. And it like, I know so many other people out there. It's like you haven't dealt with the traumas or had the space or the opportunity to explore what's really underneath this, which is what the privilege is of getting psychotherapy, is you look what's under this self-harm, what's under this pattern of behavior. Because I think of all the clients I've worked with who self-harm, you can begin to understand quickly what's under that from the biopsychosocial, which is a first session.
Well, and I think you just saying that and talking about figuring out what's underneath is something that's lacking in general knowledge about self-harm. Going back to the
Totally.
stigma, people are like, oh, why would you cut yourself? Why would you burn yourself? Like that, why would you want to hurt yourself? They don't consider the why. Like I mean, I don't even know how many clients I have worked with at this point that engage in some form of self-harm. And not a single one's just like, oh, I just do it for no reason. There is always an underlying reason, whether it be trauma, whether it be depression, whether it be numbness, whether it be anxiety. And I think if we just listen to one another and actually were willing to have conversations about it, people would understand more. But people, I think, also don't always want to take the time to do that because they're like, there is that stigma, but they're like, why would you do that? Like, I would never do that. And I don't know. Maybe we just need more understanding in general, but especially when it comes to this.
I agree with, I think it's, again, that more education, whether it's the same with suicidality, like getting comfortable with having those hard conversations. And sometimes it's not even like you like up to fixing it. It's just about listening and being there to support. I had duetted this video. It's Ginny in Georgia. I think the show is on Netflix. And there was a scene, I believe it was in the latest season, where the mom addresses the daughter because she finds a lighter and that her daughter has been burning herself. And at first the mom reacts. She's like, you burn yourself? Why would you do that? Why would you do that? And then you watch this shift happen to where mom stops reacting and she starts responding. And she sits with her and she was like, I'm so sorry that I wasn't here for you. I'm so sorry that I didn't know. Give this to me. Let me hold this for you. Let me be here for you. And it was one of the most accurate presentations of a parent addressing self-harm with a child. Was her first reaction great? Absolutely not. But I think that sometimes with parents or someone who is learning about this, they're going to have a reaction. But what she did is she said, this is not going to be like, she must have had this internal dialogue that said, I need to be here for my child because now I'm seeing that my child is struggling. And instead I'm going to switch gears and say, how can I be here to support my child versus shaming and guilting and trying to say, why would you do that? Because that's not going to get anywhere. But instead saying, I'm here for you. Let me hold this weight with you. And I thought it was just one of the most moving scenes I've seen in a TV show in a long time surrounding this topic.
Such good modeling, right? Because from the percentages that I've gathered, self-harm is more common in teenagers than any other age range. I should consult with Google Scholar on this, but I believe that's correct.
I would say the more like cutting, burning. Yes. But if you think of things Like headbanging, we see that typically in younger children, especially those that are neurodivergent. And then if we're considering things like substance abuse, eating disorders, things like that. But yes, in the stereotypical cutting burning, it does occur more frequently in teenage years. But that does not mean that younger kids nor adults do it. But yes.
Don't do it, you mean, right?
Yeah, yes. But both younger children and adults also engage in those stereotypical forms of self-harm. There we go.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, but I think that's the point I was like alluding to, is like there's so much modeling that can go into this, because we don't always choose our first coping skills, right? Like we fall into things through isolation, through trial and error, through a lot of different means. But like to be able to have a parent figure, a teacher, anybody of influence, a therapist, of course, but to have anyone of influence be able to impact someone at a young age, to show them another way to cope. Like you just can't understate how powerful and necessary that is. But just so many people don't get that. And maybe their form of self-harm exactly just evolves into something else.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, and I would say KBI started a good conversation about like unhelpful and helpful ways to respond to people who self-harm, because I have this distinct memory from high school. I ran track and field, and there was a girl on a different team than us, and self-harm scars all over her body, and people would always just stare and make comments. And like at high school track, girls are in tank tops and short shorts, like that's what you wear. And I remember just seeing her and just imagining like how vulnerable she was, even in high school, like well before I was a psychologist, being like 15, 16 years old, but like imagining the comments that she heard about herself, or how people responded, like, why would you do that to your body? Or the example you gave, KBI, of like, why would you, just a mom responding. And that's going to increase the stigma and also decrease the likelihood somebody is going to reach out for help.
Yep.
And on the other hand, responding with compassion, like, I didn't realize you were hurting so much. What can I do to help? I don't know if you all have any other ideas of helpful or unhelpful responses when somebody is self-harming.
I always say, like, one of the probably the worst things that you could ask someone is asking to see it. I definitely hear that frequently from followers, from people I've worked with over the years. Like, the worst thing is to be like, can I see it? Show me. And well, yes, like if we're with someone that we love and we care about, like sometimes it's for people, it's to like help wrap their head around it. But again, that person is already shameful and maybe feeling guilty about it and all of that, that just increases that. And instead just saying, I am here for you, and taking their word for it, that's like that we don't need to see something to believe that someone is struggling. We don't need to engage in that for someone to sit there and for us to sit there and say, well, I am here to listen and support you. How can we, what's something that I can do that can help you in this? And again, it's not, I always say there's also a piece that is not our responsibility to hold someone else's everything, but it's just saying like, is there something that we could work on as like friends, that we could work on a skill together? Like just one, not like I'm going to sit here and help you create an entire coping skill repertoire, but like, how about we sit here and we just work on breathing together? Something easy that you can practice with me. And look at it like that.
Yeah. I think that the opening the door exactly is like the most important thing, and just normalizing, like we all are trying to find ways to cope. Like every single person, whether It's through substance, exercise, eating, like music. I mean, literally, there's so many ways that we're all trying to cope with this wild life and deal with our emotions. And I think just someone knowing that you're an open person that they can talk to about their life. But I also think that's pretty rare. Like, we can minimize the shit out of that, especially as mental health professionals. Like, truly, how many people do you got in your life? And this for all the group members out there, but how many people do you have in your life that you really feel like you could talk openly about your emotional state, what you're going through? Not just the facts, but really process with and share the deeper stuff of like, this is what I'm really feeling. And I know a lot of young people don't have a single person in their life where that's the true dynamic of the relationship. Like, I could go to them and be like, oh, I feel like a failure today. I failed this exam. I don't think I'm going to make it to college. What's the point of, like, again, just to be able to have that space to be open. Like, any way you can do that and show that to someone's helpful.
And I think even too, like, even if you have a therapist, I think that can feel really uneasy to open up about these things because again, like, you know, some therapists aren't well trained in being able to dive in and dissect and be able to see like, okay, this is a coping skill, this isn't suicidal behavior. And so quickly there have been therapists out there who have died too quickly, and a client has disclosed, and then suddenly, like, they lose their therapist. They're having they're like having a wellness check done, whatever that may be, when it's maybe not to the level of that, because maybe that therapist doesn't have the most accurate training in that.
I think that goes to something that I at least get asked a lot on social media when talking about self-harm and suicidality in general, which they are two distinct things. But people usually pair them together, understandably, but they are distinct, is, you know, will I be hospitalized if I disclose that I'm being I self-harm? Or, you know, I'm scared to tell my therapist because I'm scared how they're going to react, or are they going to tell my parents? And obviously I cannot answer that for every therapist out there. But to your point, KBI, unfortunately, there are some mental health providers out there that aren't well trained in this area. And we all have our strengths and weaknesses. So that's not any shade or anything to them. But like, especially I think if you're working with teens, if you're working with anybody that has depression or trauma, like this should be an area that you at least are informed about, because it can be really scary. And to our group members listening that maybe are hesitant about opening up to your therapist or a potential future therapist, ask your therapist at the first session, second session, when you're getting to know each other, like, have you worked with people who self-harm? And it doesn't have to be about you, just like, how would you handle a situation with self-harm, with suicide, and throw in some other situations there to get a feel of how they would respond. My hope is that they would respond compassionately and want to get to the underlying cause of the self-harm, like Dr. J said earlier, and help teach you maybe alternative coping skills to reduce the frequency.
No, absolutely. You want to know what my hope is? That you have found a solid Google Scholar article for this topic.
Let's go!
So I am actually really excited about this one. Not probably as excited as I was for the imposter syndrome one, but this is a close second.
Okay.
So we're going to think critically.
So we have just discussed the spectrum of self-harm. We just talked about a lot of different things. But have you all heard of digital self-harm?
No.
Don't do this to me.
I know. I saw KBI lean back hard when you dropped that one.
Don't do this to me.
So I hadn't heard of it either until I did this Google Scholar search. But this article entitled Digital Self-Harm and Suicidality Among Adolescents is by Patchen and colleagues, and it came out in 2023. I try to find really recent articles.
You do?
Yeah,
I do.
Everyone has
I try
been
to
2023. She's like,
keep us up. I think I had like
we're
one
3 months in. How many research articles?
I think I had one December 2022, but yes.
Fresh.
So
I can smell it.
And I'm just going to give a shout out. The second author on this paper is at Florida Atlantic University, where our very own Dr. J was a professor.
Go out.
Okay. So digital self-harm is defined as the anonymous online posting, sending, or otherwise sharing of hurtful content about oneself. So these behaviors most often present as typical instances of cyberbullying. So when we think of cyberbullying, we think of those repeated and intentional, like interpersonal harm on media, social media, etc. However, with digital self-harm, the target of the cyberbullying and the aggressor are the same person. So the person portrayed as the victim publicly is actually being targeted by him or herself anonymously. So basically, they would make anonymous accounts or social media profiles and post hurtful comments on their own public profile. Yeah.
Interesting.
The layers there.
The research on digital self-harm is limited so far. But so far, we have numbers that about 5 to 10% of youth report having engaged in it. And it's correlated with outcomes such as depression and physical self-harm. And some underlying reasons they found in research so far, like self-hatred, seeking attention, and like KBI said, that's not necessarily a bad thing, depression. And so much of the research so far has focused on risk factors. So this study examined whether digital self-harm is associated with suicidal ideation and attempts. So the sample was really big, 4,972 middle and high school students from the United States, 50% female, 49.7% male, and 0.3% transgender. So that was a very pretty much even split between male and female. Average age was 14 and a half, mostly white, but we did have Black and Hispanic representation as well as other race. So what the researcher found is that 9% of adolescents reported they had anonymously reported something online about themselves that was mean, and 5% said they had anonymously cyberbullied themselves. There were no differences in experience with digital self-harm by gender or race, though non-heterosexual adolescents were significantly more likely to have engaged in the behavior. Likewise, twice as many non-heterosexual adolescents said they had anonymously cyberbullied themselves compared to heterosexual adolescents. There were significant differences by age, though it was nonlinear, with 14-year-olds being the most likely to have engaged in either form of digital self-harm, and 17-year-olds being least likely. With regard to suicidality, about 8% of adolescents reported that they had thought seriously about attempting suicide in the past year, while 5.3% said they had attempted during that time period. Non-heterosexual students were significantly more likely than heterosexual students to have seriously thought about attempting suicide and to have attempted suicide, which is consistent with other research. 12-year-olds were more likely to have thought about attempting suicide compared to other ages, but there were no differences across age for suicide attempts. And then adolescents who said they had posted something mean about themselves anonymously online were more than 5 times as likely to have thought seriously about suicide. And adolescents who said they had cyberbullied themselves anonymously were nearly 7 times as likely to thought about suicide.
So it's kind of like negative self-talk, but you're carrying it out and doing it back to yourself through another username that you created, right?
Yeah, basically.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
That was not where I thought digital self-harm was going. Like when I thought about that, I'm like thinking like, okay, like digital self-harm to me would be like I'm struggling with my body image, so I'm following all of these like models and Photoshop, like all like that would like that's where my brain first went to that. But like also, wow. And one of the things you said, Jess, that really stood out to me though, was that 14-year-olds were more apt to do this than 17-year-olds, which makes me wonder the like neurodevelopment differences in those two individuals.
Yeah, and it wasn't linear because obviously if it was like linear because they had 12-year-olds would be the highest. But yeah, I do wonder. I also think about just like life experiences. 14, you're usually like freshman in high school. Maybe you're having difficulty with transitioning to high school, making new friends. By 17, you're a junior or senior. Maybe you have your friends, maybe you're over bullying yourself, things like that. But yeah, no, I came across that article and I was like, what's this? And I read it and I was like, I have never heard of it. And I work with teens.
Yeah.
Right.
And
I
had
makes
never.
Sense.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it goes to the ways that we carry out different coping or the ways we kind of project our mental health within technology, right?
Yep.
Like as technology changes, the ways we interface with our own mental health changes. It's just like so fascinating.
Well, and it also like this is a whole other topic that we won't dive into, but it also brings up the supervision that is not happening online.
They touched on that briefly in the article.
Like,
yeah.
And so that if someone is like doing this, like that also shows, you know, how much supervision are these individuals having online, that this is something that is commonly happening. I mean, in certain populations and certain age ranges.
Is it true? I think I just learned that this week that you have to be 18 to have TikTok. Is that right?
No, I think you can be 16. You have to be 18 to go live.
Oh, because like when you look at analytics, they don't
Yeah.
track anything under 18. Like it'll say no one under 18 exists.
Oh, interesting.
There's no analytic data for anyone under 18, which in my mind it was like, but why? Why is there no why
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe that corrects
But
an
again, that
assumption.
just shows how easy. I mean, we all know that there are individuals under the age of 18 on that platform.
Oh,
yeah.
Every one of my team, every single one of them. So I thought that was weird. I was like, all of them are on TikTok. TikTok is showing me analytics that says no one under 18 is on this app, which really confused me. I was like, so wait, what? Like, you just don't track their data? Which in some ways I'm like, I don't know if that's a pro or a con. It's just weird.
Yeah.
No, it is. No, 100%.
I also wonder, thinking back to this article too, like if people are engaging in digital self-harm, cyberbullying themselves, things like that, and then other people join in on the cyberbullying, I mean, that's going to compound. So the like anonymous person might be the ringleader, the one that starts it, but then are other people joining in, or are people on contrast being like, don't say that? I don't know. It's just very interesting to think about.
Yeah, because my mind did jump through that phenomenon that we see where people like do the bad thing so no one else will do it, or they say the bad thing about themselves so no one else will say it. They'll be like, well, so it kind of made sense in my mind. I'm like, maybe they're kind of carrying that out of like, I'm going to jump to this account and be like, you freaking idiot. So that way, if anyone else says it, they'll be like, well, I already said it about myself.
Yeah.
In a way.
That's a very good point. Yeah. It's kind of like, I mean, this is not the same exact thing. Well, I guess this is a better example that just came to mind. When if you have an insecurity and you make jokes about your insecurity before other people can do it. Yeah.
I'm sure there's
I
many
don't know.
mechanisms, but that was just one. Yeah, that stuck out. I was like, interesting.
I mean, on Justin, he doesn't need to have a burner account because I'll just roast him in the comments regardless.
Yeah, that's how you know it's a good friend. Like don't create a burner account.
I will straight up use my account to be like, Justin.
Yeah,
your eye looks wonky in that video.
That's how you know it's a good friend.
Because I know that he overthanked that 40 times and we filmed it 39.
If you ever want to get me, this goes for group members too. I'll laugh out loud. All you have to do is be like, pick a word I said and be like, why did you say promise weird like that? I swear I'll laugh out loud because that's what my brain will do. Like I'll listen to it back and be like, I'll choose a single word and be like, yo, you said that word really weird.
Did I even pronounce that word right? Is that even how it's pronounced?
No, I know my brain.
Justin's just opening us up now to cyberbullying the shit out of him.
That's true. All right. Well, do it once. Everyone gets one shot.
You know what everybody gets one shot at doing though? Engaging in the polls. I'm on it today, guys.
You are.
They only got one shot at answering the polls.
It's true.
So this week we did a bunch of polls, and so I will pull them up and we will go over them. So the first poll was, do you know someone who is currently or has struggled with self-harm? It was either yes, I do, or no, I haven't. What do you think?
I would say yes, I do is the winner.
Oh, what is
72%. Yes, I do.
I was going to say 74.
Woo!
No, I haven't is 11%. And yes, I do is 89%.
Wow.
What if it was 88 and TikTok just didn't do the math right again?
Instagram? I would have been so mad.
Oh, did I say TikTok?
Yeah.
Well,
either one. It works for either.
TikTok probably doesn't do math either.
I mean, that doesn't surprise me.
Mm-mm.
Neither does KBI when it comes to her Remy's.
No, it doesn't.
Not at all.
So the next one, it says, when you think of a person who self-harms, what age do you picture them? Do you picture them as a child, 12 and under, a teenager, 13 through 18, an adult, 19 or older, or I never really thought about it, or all ages?
I definitely think teenager.
Teen, 80%.
I was going to say teen, 68%.
If this was Price is Right, you both would lose. Ooh. Teenager was 61%.
Okay, but I was closer.
Yeah, but it's closer without going over. That's how it works.
So K10 won that one.
Yeah. The next second runner-up was I never really thought about it, or all ages was 32%. An adult is 5%, and a child is only 1%.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So, I mean, and maybe it's my skewed perspective because I work with kids, but like I would, because when I think of like children self-harming, I think of like headbanging, biting themselves, things like that. So I would have, I mean, I know it's all ages, but if I had to rank, I would put children above adults.
But the way that it's worded when you're working with children is that's behavioral. That gets worded as behavioral, not self-harm. When the reality is it is self-harm.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's again the same as like we talk about adults. Maybe they're engaging in more societally acceptable self-harm like boxing, drinking, substance use, punching a hole in the wall, whatever that may be. Mm-hmm. It becomes more quote unquote socially acceptable.
Right.
So, okay. The next one is, do you know the different forms of self-harm? It's yes, I do, no, I don't, or I know some.
I know some.
Yeah, 54%.
48%.
Still would lose.
Gosh. Over bidders.
I know some is 43%.
Okay, I'm still the closest.
The winner is yes, I do at 50%.
Wow.
Oh, all right.
Plot twist. And no, I don't is 7%.
Yeah.
So that's interesting to me because like I mean, we've touched on a lot of things, but I'm sure there's group members listening that are like, you didn't mention X, Y, or Z.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll be interested if there are people listening who thought that they knew the different forms and they're like, oh my God, I never thought of that as a form of self-harm.
Yeah.
So I wonder, maybe we'll pose this question after the episode is out for a little bit and see if anything has shifted.
Love it.
Ooh, I like it.
The next one is, if you have self-harmed, have you found alternative coping skills to reduce or stop? Yes, I have. I have found some, or no, I haven't.
I'm going to go with some again.
I'm going to go with some. 42%.
51.
Justin wins this round. I have found some is 57%, with the next runner-up being yes, I have at 29%, and no, I haven't at 14%.
Okay. Hopefully 14% we can lift up here.
I know.
Or I guess drop down. You know what I'm trying to say.
Yes. So then we left you with a question box, and it was just about leaving some words of encouragement. So I'm going to read several of them off for you guys. And this is just kind of words of encouragement for anyone who might be struggling with self-harm. So it says, you are worth love. You are worth loving yourself. See yourself as beautiful and shine. Don't be ashamed of your scars. Accept them because they are part of your story. All feelings are valid. The world is a better place with you in it. I believe you. Don't be ashamed of it. You are not alone. Self-harm served you and saved you even though it's not good for you. You will find new ways. Someone said, if you got this, if you need something alternative, draw on yourself and snap a rubber band. Someone just said, I love you. I see you. It doesn't make you a bad person. You are worthy of help and worthy of love. Someone also commented, you've got this. I care about you. Keep going. And another one says, I'm just looking at a couple because a lot of them are just like, I love you. I see you. I support you. I understand. It's nothing to be ashamed about. Keep fighting. And I think that, I think that a lot of these are amazing. It's more like you are loved no matter what. It's just a lot of these, like at the end of the day, where self-harm can make someone feel so isolated. For people to know that they're not alone and that there are also people out there that maybe you don't even know. There might be your best friend might be struggling and you don't, and you both could be struggling with it and not even know it.
Absolutely. I love that. That was such a good idea. That
I'm
really
glad you read that because I was crying while you were reading them. I was like,
it is. And I think it's just one of those things that, like, again, it just feels so alone and isolating.
Yeah.
That we live in a world that creates us to be isolated, even though we are connective human beings. And just to know, even though you might not know any of those people who said those things, they still mean them.
Absolutely. Know what keeps us connected and feel less alone, though? Our group member questions.
Group member questions. Yeah.
They absolutely do. We love this section of the pod. We love hearing from you. We love seeing your names, where you're from, what's happening. Oh, we just love it. Love it so much. Love scroll through. We have just gotten so many the last few episodes.
How many did we get this week?
I forgot to put how many. It was close to the sleep episode.
It was close.
I'll pull it up. And a lot of them were very different. We got a lot of similar ones. 42. We got 42 individual. I will say 42 people. We had a number of people submit multiple questions.
Yeah.
We always appreciate you. If we don't get to your question, again, we're so grateful that you asked. Keep asking questions. We'll get to you. But Antonia from Germany. What is life like in Germany today? But how do you tell someone else that you hurt yourself and that you need help? That's a great question.
I think the first step is just finding someone you trust. I mean, because the reality is we could just tell anybody. You could just give that to a stranger, but you're not going to get what you need in return. And so it's finding someone that you trust. And for some people, it is just putting it out there and just being honest. But it's also knowing, can I trust this person? Do I believe that this person has the ability to show up for me?
And whenever I think about disclosing some vulnerable information, I think about like what method seems the easiest to you. Like, is it just saying it? Like, I just need to get this out and say it. Do you want to write it down? Do you want to send a text message? Do you want to send a text message to your friend like, hey, I have something to talk to you about. When are you free? Is it writing something on your phone and giving it to the person you trust? So I think part of it, I agree with KBI 100%, identifying a trusted person. And then as for how, whatever feels most comfortable for you. And exactly what you said, Antonia. Hey, I need help. I hurt myself in this way. I don't want to do it anymore, or I want to find alternate coping skills and I need help. Can you help me? So Grace from Oregon, didn't we already have a conversation about how you say this state? Oregon?
Yeah,
Oregon?
because I
It's
said
the Oregon
Oregon
Trail.
Trail, and it threw
Yeah.
everyone off. Yeah.
Okay. What are some methods of harm reduction that you or your clients have found helpful?
I like implementing strategies that evoke a feeling, like something that will pull you into the moment through your senses. Cold does this pretty well.
Yeah.
Like people can hold ice cubes. They can kind of rub ice cubes over your hand. Your hand innervated with thousands of touch neurons. Actually, it could be millions. Some neuroscientist out there is like, that's millions. But anyways, so many touch neurons. It's so sensitive. Like you just take your finger and run it over your hand. And it's like you can be amazed when you're really paying attention of what you can feel. You do that with an ice cube. It just things that pull you into the present and get you to feel something in your body. Sometimes I've had clients do this through music. It's like go to your playlist, play something that evokes feeling, emotion, expression. Because I want you to be able to feel something and express something. And so that could be a tactile thing, that could be through like music or sound, could be through journaling. Like some of my clients get to that point where they're able to do it through written language and like write it down themselves. This is actually what's coming up for me right now. But those are some of the transitional things I've used, especially when thinking about harm reduction.
Well, and I love using temperature. That is probably one of my favorite things. For me, harm reduction in this capacity is, again, you can find other alternatives, absolutely. But I also look at harm reduction in if we're engaging in some bodily harm, how can we make that safe? So are we making sure we're having appropriate cleaned tools or things to clean wounds with? Are we learning what appropriate wound care is? For me, that's harm reduction in a lot of this, because we can definitely we talk all the time about using a rubber band, using ice, going for a walk, doing that. But I think one of the things we don't talk the most about is if we're not doing those things and we are engaging in more of the harmful bodily harm, that type of stuff, making sure we are taking care of ourselves in that. So making sure you have your own first aid kit, making sure you know basic bloodborne pathogens, those type of things that help you stay safe. Because things like infection could happen. Things like just some more severe things can come of that we want to make sure we have an awareness of that. And so for me, that's where harm reduction comes in.
Mm-hmm. I also think of identifying triggers and patterns. Mm-hmm. So not even just like what emotions are arising when you engage in self-harm, whatever that looks like. Are there specific triggers? Like I can think of a number of clients I've worked with that being alone late at night was a trigger. So can we help you engage in better sleep hygiene to get you to fall asleep earlier, so that lapse in time between being alone at night and falling asleep is shorter? Are there, if it's like trauma based, are there specific triggers? How can we learn to manage those triggers in a different way or avoid them, not in a maladaptive way, but like, is there a more helpful way? So I think there's a lot of different ways, plus the concrete skills that you all already said.
Totally.
Okay. Sophie from Germany asks, what is usually the first thing you do when someone tells you that they've been self-harming?
Yeah, the first thing I do is thank them for telling me. That
That's what I do.
Yeah, totally. Me and old Dr. Just on the exact same page. You can't minimize that. I know some people be like, that's some cliche therapist shit. It's not. It's not. Especially if you want to reduce stigma. You validate someone's experience. You get curious about it with them. And yeah, you welcome them into space. Thank you so much for telling me about that. And then you just open the door to the curiosity about it. Of like, yeah, when did you first start? What was going on around that time for you? There's not wrong questions to ask when you come from a compassionate and curious place. And that's a message for young therapists out there who can feel like, oh, I might ask something and they might self-harm. No. If you're coming from a compassionate and curious place, again, maybe there's one question out there someone would be like, well, what if I asked? But for the most part, there really isn't. It's just getting curious about that person's experience, wondering when did this start for them? How often do they feel pulled into it? What have they noticed? Like, are they numb? Are they feeling a lot of emotions? Like we've talked about, do they want to gain control? Like you just are trying to fully understand their experience. But it starts with being thankful that someone would share and be that open with you. And that's a response I feel like a lot of therapists give for many different things, talking about trauma, talking about any kind of taboo things. We can go into the kink world. Like there's a lot of things that people, they carry shame. And when they tell you it, you can feel that they've been carrying this around. So it's good just to see someone or hold that with them from a compassionate, curious angle.
And I think that's important for anybody listening to take that in, because the thing is we are trained professionals. And yes, there's probably a piece of that that's in our nature to be kind and compassionate and really sit in those things. But I think it's also important to acknowledge that not everybody is like that. And for anybody listening who might know someone who is struggling or have an inkling that someone might be struggling, like learning how to be compassionate yourself and again, learning how to respond versus react. Because again, so quickly as like a trained professional, like if I take myself out of my trained professional and maybe someone really close to me, my child comes to me, my best friend, if I didn't have some of this, I would probably react in a much more responding way. And so I think that it's important for us to kind of also take in that and be willing to learn and even be willing to acknowledge when we may say something that's off the cuff and we were like, oh, you know what? I didn't actually like how that came out. My response was not great and I need to take accountability for that. I want to restart this.
The only thing I'll add, putting my psychologist hat on and going back to Dr. J's answer, usually after I thank them, I'll ask, is this something you want to talk about? And if it is, because sometimes they're like, no, I just wanted to let you know. I like to ask them, what are your goals related to self-harm? Because not everybody wants to stop. Maybe their goal of telling a therapist is, I just felt like I was keeping this secret from you. It's not something I'm ready to work on, but just wanted to know some people's goals are 100% I want to stop. Some is reduction of frequency. So that's how I approach it. And then going to everything Dr. J said, talking about history with it, triggers, underlying emotions, things like that.
Such a valid point. I'm glad you mentioned that. So true. Josh, Alberta, Canada. How do you help someone who's self-harming if you can see the signs, but they haven't told you? That's a good question.
I'm honestly torn because part of me is like, reach out. Like, hey, I'm worried about you. I noticed X, Y, or Z. And I'm assuming, Josh, you asking this means this is a person you care about. Yeah. The other part of me is also hesitant because is there a reason they haven't told you? And it could simply be like they're ashamed of it and they're waiting for somebody to reach out. So I think if you do reach out, definitely doing it with compassion, saying, hey, I noticed this. I'm worried about you. Would you like to talk about it? If not, I'm here for you when you're ready.
Oh, absolutely.
So Yusra, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, from Iraq, asks how to recognize emotional self-harm in ourselves.
Be aware of your own self-talk.
Yeah.
I always say, like, are you harder on yourself than other people? Like, are you holding yourself to a completely different standard than anybody else in your life to the point that it's making you so distraught?
Yeah. Would you talk to a friend that way? Kind of messaging. I think this can be hard if I'm just going to kind of normalize that. The amount of clients I've had where I'm certain this is the first time that they're echoing their negative self-talk to another being, and it's like happening right in front of them. They're saying it, confidentially in this private, safe space to me, but it's always lived in their head. I think that's the tricky things with a lot of things that just stay in your head and you're trying to like hold it outward in your hand and look at it. Again, privilege of psychotherapy. It allows you to do this with another individual. But when you can start to pick up exactly what KBI is saying, how do you treat yourself after disappointment? How do you encourage yourself? Like all of us have disappointment and setback, but I think that's sort of those moments where you can be like, what am I telling myself? Or if something's difficult or challenging, what am I telling myself? There's these sort of pivotal moments where you can kind of just see, like, how do I generally treat myself? But otherwise, I validate it can kind of be tricky to notice this.
So this is from Anonymous, actually. They say, how do you respond to people who just tell you to stop self-harming without giving you any ideas, but they just expect you to stop?
You tell them to listen to this podcast.
You send them this podcast.
You send them this link. Yeah.
That's hard.
And I think a lot of times that comes from someone that statement, just stop, comes from someone who would also say, well, why don't you just calm down?
Or why don't you just eat to somebody?
Like they truly don't understand the nature of what is going on. They truly don't understand that it's its own coping mechanism. It's its own piece. And I think that until they're willing to even just acknowledge that they don't understand, they're going to continue to sit in that seat. And that is a really hard, especially if this person, is a parent or a sibling or a partner. That can be really hard that, they're just sitting there saying like, just stop. Like, just stop. And it's not that simple.
And depending on who the person is and how close you are and how comfortable you feel, I would maybe start with something along the lines of, I know you keep telling me to stop self-harming, and I'm assuming it's coming from a place of worry about me, but it's not that easy. And or if there are things that you know that you need from this person, even saying like, if you're willing to help me, I'm willing to take it, but telling me to stop self-harming and having the expectation that I just can is not helpful. But once again, depending on the dynamics and the relationship, like I know, like as a teen, I would never have said that to my parents. Like I would have not had the capacity to, but maybe if it's a friend, and you do truly believe they're well-intentioned, saying, you know, I know you mean this in a good way, but it's not helpful for you to say that.
Yeah, I hope you've been able to advocate to get a mental health professional. I mean, sometimes these are the bridges that I know minors use to be like, I don't know how I would like to work with a professional. Because it just, obviously this person just isn't informed. Like, and I hope they're not. I hope they're not a mental health professional. But they obviously just don't have the knowledge or understand that this is more complicated and is a form of coping. But there's something underneath all that. Great questions. These questions are just so poignant, revealing. Like y'all are just so interested in the topics on this podcast. It just makes me so excited to see how you're coping and dealing with things, but how this impacts you. It's so illuminating. Jess from California, what are your thoughts on safety plans for teens who are using self-harm as a distraction from emotional distress? I'm finding that schools are very quick to jump to this plan, even if the student is not suicidal.
So I personally don't like the term safety plan. I like the term like I'm not doing well or whatever, because safety plans so quickly can go to suicidality versus, hey, I'm just struggling. And like, and that safety plan can be implemented, that safety plan, that like I'm struggling plan, I'm not doing well. I think I've termed it, I'm not doing well plan, because it can apply when, hey, I'm just not doing well, I'm run down, I'm doing all of this. But it also could apply if you are a level 10, because again, I think so much we apply safety in this capacity when safety isn't maybe the risk. Maybe this person isn't as much of a quote unquote safety risk as they're, okay, I'm just not coping well.
So that's really interesting, because I don't mind the term safety plan, or coping plan is sometimes what I use. I think my issue comes in is when people mix up what a safety plan and a self-harm or suicide contract is. Because I am personally against self-harm or suicide contracts where basically you make the individual sign saying, I'm not going to self-harm or attempt suicide before our next session. I do know they work for some people. Research does not show that they are effective. But a safety plan, a coping plan where you're identifying your warning signs, your triggers, alternate coping skills, people that you can reach out to for help on a personal level, professionals you can reach out to, emergency numbers, reasons to live if you're leaning towards suicidality, or like if it's for self-harming behavior, like reasons to not engage in whatever form of self-harm. I think they can be helpful if done properly. And if the individual is a participant and has buy-in in it. And I'm a big fan of like actually writing it out when I worked psychiatric inpatient or safety. And this is such a minimal thing, but they were more like aesthetically pleasing, and they could color in and stuff so that they could actually like physically hang it up somewhere and see it versus like doing it mentally or just having it scribbled down on a piece of paper. So I think they can be helpful, whatever you call them, if done appropriately and effectively. Yeah.
No, I agree.
So Vanessa from Michigan says, as a teacher who knows that one of my students self-harms, what can I do to support them?
Yeah, I think if you're running with the info we're pouring out of this podcast, you could name for them, listen, we're all trying to find ways to cope. I'm just a big believer that when you don't got to go deep into your story, but when you can just look someone in the face and tell them, I have suffered. I've been through some shit and I've hit some real lows. And I know I've struggled at times to find ways to cope. And if that's not your story, that's not your story. Figure out a way. Figure out a way to be a human is what I'd say. But I know for me, that's an easy thing to say. It's not on comparing. It's not on saying I've been through worse times. No. It's just saying I'm a human who has suffered. And it's been hard to find ways to cope. And I want you to feel connected. I want you to find space in people that you can talk to. Yeah, that might be the link to someone in the school. I don't know what resources you have in your particular school, but I would use that as a bridge to be like, yo, I've suffered. We all find ways to cope. I want you to know there's people you can talk to. Like it goes a long way because you're not avoiding it. You're not pretending it's not there. You're also not sounding an alarm in their ear. You're being a compassionate human. And if I know humans, we've all been through some kind of shit where it's like, yo, this, you can all think right now would have been the low spots in your life. But sharing that with a fellow student, again, not having to go into the nitty gritty and linking that to there are people who you can talk to and that it can get better. It goes a long way.
Sarah from California asks, what advice would you give a client who struggles with shame because they're an adult who struggles with self-harm? I know this struggle isn't limited to teenagers, but it feels like this is something I should have, quote unquote, grown out of by now.
And we got a number of questions from adults who self-harm regarding shame and things like that. So I think that alone speaks to you're not alone. I would ask you or have you reflect on, where does this shame come from? Like you explicitly stated, Sarah, like, it's not limited to teenagers. So is it society telling you that you shouldn't be struggling with this? Is it something that you have told yourself? Do you have expectations for yourself? Like, I don't know your story, but I'm thinking if any adult out there that engages in what we consider like the stereotypical self-harm, like cutting, burning, did you start a decade ago? And does the shame come from the fact that you haven't been able to find alternate coping skills? So I think identifying what the shame is and where it comes from can help then move forward. And maybe you just haven't found things that help you, and that's okay.
More than okay. Yeah, I don't think we stop learning those things about ourselves. As an elder millennial, I feel like I'm still learning ways to cope. Like I genuinely believe that. Like you don't stop learning, like, what are the ways I make it through this life and express myself and continue to grow and evolve. Like I don't think that process just ever ends, or we reach this point where I'm like, you just know how to cope through anything. Bree from Wisconsin. I think I know this, Bree. Hi, Bree. Are body-focused repetitive behaviors such as skin picking, nail biting considered self-harm, or is there a difference?
There is absolutely a difference. As someone who struggles with body-focused repetitive behavior, specifically skin picking, I very much do think that there is a difference in, again, I think it's what is the driving force behind it.
Mm-hmm.
That is the key. That's the key factor there of what is the driving force.
That's what I was going to say. And KBI, you can speak on this more from lived experience, but a lot of times things like skin picking, nail biting are like more of a compulsive behavior or anxiety related. It could be ADHD related. Or when I think of self-harm, although not all of it has to be intentional, like for example, our critical thoughts and things like that aren't always intentional. Now, if you are picking your skin for the purpose of hurting yourself, I would say that is a form of self-harm. So that it could actually, now that I'm talking out loud and processing this, like skin picking could be a body-focused repetitive behavior or a form of self-harm. It's the intent behind why you're engaging in that behavior, or the lack of intent, I guess, if it's more of a compulsive behavior. Is it to reduce anxiety? Which one could argue that self-harm is a form of coping for anxiety, but I would definitely say the intent behind it is the biggest difference. So Elizabeth from Louisiana says, my brother has been struggling with undiagnosed, untreated depression and anxiety for years. He has scars from years of self-harm, has moved to drinking copious amounts of alcohol. Any attempts or mentions of getting him help into counseling are dismissed. I'm worried that his actions are cries for help, and I'm afraid of him reaching a point of no return. How can we get him help when he is so reluctant to seek help? This is hard. Especially if your brother's an adult.
You can't make someone get help if they don't want help. Like and that's the hardest part about it all is we could literally be watching someone struggle, but if they're not willing to even take a baby step, then there's not a lot that we can do, and that makes it just even more difficult and more barriers in that. And it makes us as the person watching it, we probably may feel like crap because we're like, we want to do more. We wish that we could help, but sometimes there's not really anything we can do.
Yeah, this brought up thoughts of me with my brother. I know I've talked about a number of times. He had bipolar type 1, was in and out of juvenile detention, did a lot of things that were risky and got in a lot of trouble, but it was hard. It was very hard to watch. And I really believe this, though. There is that point where you're trying so hard to help someone that I think sometimes the best course of action is that you model being a healthy, coping person who's taking care of yourself. I know that might seem like selfish in some ways, but I agree with what Dr. Jess, KBI have all said of like, it comes to a point where you can be self-sacrificial in your attempts to get someone to take care of themselves, take care of your mental health, recognize their problems. But I think at some point, some people need to find out for themselves. They absolutely do. But you modeling, maybe you go to therapy. Maybe you talk about your stress. Maybe you talk about how this whole situation gives you anxiety. You modeling that you can take care of yourself, I think can sort of be a back way that you'll be a demonstration for other people, including your brother. Seems counterintuitive, but I know by you and everyone around keeping their boat afloat, yeah, model something that we can take care of our mental health.
Okay. Now, we have one last question. And I think this is definitely thought-provoking because when I saw it, I was like, ooh. So they don't have their name, but the name is Curiosity Killed No Cat from Ontario. Why is non-suicidal self-harm discouraged so strongly? If it has very little risk and may not leave scars, what's wrong with using it to cope?
I instantly got curious of like, it's an interesting point, but I'm also like, I wonder what it is. So you know what I mean? I'm almost playing that game of like, what is the self-harm they're engaging in?
So that was my thought, because when I read very little risk, because I would argue a lot of non-suicidal self-harm has a lot of risk. KBI brought up infection. If we're thinking of the traditional cutting, for example, if whatever you're using to cut yourself is not clean, if you accidentally cut too deep, there's infection risk. If we're thinking of things like head banging, punching, that, I mean, could cause physical harm, broken bones, even scratching can result in infection, things like that. I mean, I think of like drinking, over exercising, restriction, like all of those come with a lot of risk. And even, I guess, because curiosity killed no cat, you said may not even leave scars. So I'm thinking, I hate the term superficial cutting, but I'm thinking of like scratching or maybe things that wouldn't leave scars. Yes, for the most part, I would say on the day to day, it might not have risk. And when we're very emotionally vulnerable and emotionally overwhelmed, we can't always fully control how deep we go or what that transpires into. So I guess that's my devil's advocate thought. I don't even know if that's a devil advocate thought, but that was my gut instinct.
And for me, like, I also think of like, you know, coping skills are coping skills, right? But we have adaptive and maladaptive. Like a lot of times the adaptive coping skills usually help to move a person forward and usually help to, again, be able to sit and process the feeling, be able to sit in that, versus the maladaptive tend to be more distractive, unhelpful kind of those pieces. Yes, they get you through that moment. Yes, they are a coping skill, but whether or not, like this person said, whether or not it's, you know, doesn't leave scars, isn't super harmful, does it actually help you move forward in whatever the distress is that you're experiencing, other than being able to get through the wave of emotion? Does it actually help you look what's underneath and deal with the trauma, deal with the incident, the trigger, whatever it may be that's causing that influx of emotion?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. I was gonna say you can take any coping skill and just ask yourself, what's the propensity for growth? Because that, if you were my client, whatever coping skill you'd name, exactly what KBI is saying is I could name a lot of other coping skills that could have propensity for growth, for you to get curious about your emotions, for you to develop a new craft, for you to develop new confidence or physical health, or again, fill in the blank. So it's almost changing the question to saying not what's wrong with this, but what's the benefit of this? Because again, there's a lot of coping skills where it's easy and obvious to state where the benefit could be or where this could take you or how you could grow through it. Great question, though. I love the question.
Oh yeah, well, it's thought
Thoughtful.
provoking, right? Because at the end of the
So
day,
thoughtful.
like at the end of the day, like it is a coping skill.
Sure. Sure.
And so it's just interesting, like, you know, the way that they worded it and, you know, their name. I was like, I was like, we need to ask this one. But I thought all the questions were really great. And it's always so interesting to me when we have more
Oh.
of a serious topic and just how like, and still how flowy it goes and how like, you know, in depth we can get on a podcast talking about some of these things.
It's all because of the group members.
It
It really
is.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for joining for today's session about a topic that may be difficult, but also it's very important to bring awareness to. We hope you learned something new and learn ways to help yourself or others who are struggling with self-harm. So as always, we leave you with a reflection question that we'll post over on our Instagram. And we really like building that coping skill toolbox. We've done this a few times on other podcast episodes. So we leave you with, what is one positive way that you can cope with uncomfortable emotions this week? As always, please rate, review, and subscribe, and share this episode with someone who may benefit from it. And we will see you next week in group therapy. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.